Hey everybody, another Three Geeks conversation. I have Mark Simon with me. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing great, Justin. Glad to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. You might be the first storyboard artist I've ever spoken to or talked about in a career. So I'm so excited. It's like the creative industry is so broad that I always love hearing about kind of like these avenues people can go down and have a whole career. And I would love to hear what it's like to being a storyboard artist and all the great things you've been associated with and had the chance to work on. Like you have a laundry list of really cool stuff you've done, and I'd love to hear about it.
And yeah, I'll tell you, it's fun too because I get to draw and tell stories every day. And as an artist, my entire life, I can't think of anything that could be more fun for me.
Sure. So I'm going to take a logical leap and say you've been creative your whole life. I would assume drawing and stuff.
Yep.
What kind of led you to storyboarding, though? What kind of got you into the industry?
All right. Well, I was always an artist. I mean, to the point where my dad was a musician and an engineer and kept giving me music lessons. And I would always come home from the music lessons with cartoons drawn on the sheet music.
Sure.
So they finally realized that wasn't a good use of time or money. So then they started giving me art lessons. So it's relatively direct with one kind of really interesting thing. So when I was 12, I was a champion skateboarder and I had my own line of skateboards. And I was designing my own boards and I was designing my own marketing. I designed all my own stickers that were sold in the stores. Mm-hmm. So, I got my start doing marketing and advertising. My father quit being an engineer and decided to build custom homes. So by the time I was 14, I became the superintendent running all the job sites. Mm. They gave me a car when I was 14 and just told me not to be an idiot. So,
that's awesome.
So here I am in 8th grade driving to work every day. And then when I was 16, I started designing all the marketing for the company, and I did all the architectural renderings of our homes, and we built commercial real estate as well. And I did all the architectural renderings for them, and I started building other clients, people who worked with our company, and even parents of some of my girlfriends.
Sure.
So I started a marketing company when I was in high school called Nomis Creations. I paid my way through college doing that and publishing a magazine. And then when I graduated, I'm going to back up for a second. Leading into college, when I was in high school, my family was attacked by a gang that for a number of months was trying to kill us.
Is that your book? I was going to ask you about that, your memoir?
Yeah, my memoir, Attacked. Yeah. And I was one of those kids. I wasn't part of the cool squad, but I was relatively popular just because I did so many different things. People knew me. I wasn't one of the popular kids, but everyone knew who I was. And I was in all the honors classes until the attack started happening. And I failed my advanced math class. And that gave me an extra day or an extra time period. And my art teacher said, the theater department could really stand some help. You build things and design things. Why don't you go see if you can help them out? And that's where I fell in love with theater. I'd never seen a play before I joined theater in high school, and fell in love with it. Got a scholarship to college in theater after only a couple months of being in it. And so, I went to college. I studied movie making and commercial art. When I graduated, I thought, hey, Hollywood sounds cool. And I just moved. I'd never been there. I had no connections whatsoever. I just moved because I've led kind of an enchanted life, honestly.
Sure.
I've just succeeded at almost everything I've tried. So I figured, it's just something else. I'll just do it. And I did. I started building sets for a couple months at a set building house just to understand how Hollywood did it different. And then I got a job working for Roger Corman, designing sets for a sci-fi movie called Slave Girls from Beyond Infinity.
Was that pretty cool?
It was awesome. I mean, I was getting paid less than $1 an hour. Literally, I got paid $100 a week, and I was putting in about 105, 110 hours a week.
Yeah.
But it built a great portfolio. And so I became an art director and production designer for a number of years, which was fun. It was just like running the crews when I was building homes, but I wasn't drawing and telling stories as much. And I missed that. Mm-hmm. So I went to at the time, the biggest agency in the world was called Storyboards Inc. They were based in Venice. And I just went over there and I just walked in and I asked to speak to an agent. Showed him a couple samples, stuff I put together. He goes, nope, it's all wrong. Nothing about this is what we do. So I started asking a lot of questions. And a week later, I showed back up with new samples. He said, better, not great. I asked more questions. A week later, I showed up. And the week after that, I showed up. And I literally came in every Friday. They didn't ask me to. I just did. Until this agent looked at it and goes, all right, sounds good. Want a Honda commercial? And
awesome.
And placed me on it. I took that. At the time, I just met my wife at HBO. I was designing and building the sets for an O.J. Simpson TV series called First and 10. And I went to the executive producer. I said, I don't know if you ever need boards. Here's some samples. I'm here anyway. Use me. Mm-hmm. And 2 weeks later, he called me up, had me rewrite an episode and storyboard it for them. It was one that was supposed to be scary, and it wasn't. And he said, can you make it scary? I just said yes, and then figured out how. And that launched storyboarding for me. So I was doing art directing and storyboarding at the same time. And I'll wrap this up in just a sec, but it's all relevant. So right as I was about to go into the next season of that show, my wife was working on a movie and the big quake hit Frisco back in 89. And she called me up freaking out. She said, we can't get out of here soon enough. I cannot be here a minute longer. So I turned down my jobs while she was wrapping up the movie. We thought, well, Chicago and New York are too cold. Orlando's up and coming. Let's just go to Orlando. Again, I had never been there. Didn't know anyone, but knew we could make it. So we literally just drove across the country, rented a house over the phone, pulled into Orlando. We got jobs right away, and we opened up Nickelodeon. I was a second designer at Nick. My wife became one of their top producers. And I left Nickelodeon to work for Spielberg. He brought Sequest in, the second season of Sequest, the old Roy Scheider futuristic submarine show. And when I landed that job storyboarding for Spielberg, that was it. I gave up art directing. I never looked back. That literally was my launch for full-time storyboarding.
So to piggyback off of that, what was that like? What, like, was it you and Steven Spielberg just on the phone or in the room just hammering out like scenes?
Well, he didn't direct it at all. He was a producer. Oh, okay. So on these hour-long dramas, it's, for the most part, at least for broadcast, it's a different director every week. Or every episode, I should say. And it's different now with streaming. We do it in blocks, so a director does 2 or 3 per block. But then I was working with Spielberg, sending him, because I also did all the concept art and I designed a bunch of the characters in the show. Oh, yeah. And so I would send him stuff and I would get some notes back from him on what some of the ships would look like, or like, when I designed all the gills on one of the characters and I forget a couple of the other characters I did, but, so I was working back and forth with him like that, but I never got to work face to face with him. Sure. But it was still, but I was getting all of his approvals. In fact, I've got one of the pieces right across from me over here that I drew, that he had approved. So, but the show was amazing. It was super high budget. The food 3 times a day was incredible. I gained weight. It was science fiction. It was Spielberg. It was the biggest budget show on TV at the time. Yeah, there's not a whole lot that I could dislike about that production. It was awesome. Sure.
With you mentioned there's directors, a new director every week. Then is that you and that person just coming together for that week and saying, "Hey, how do you want this thing to work out?" Am I following along correctly? Yeah.
So the way it works because a lot of people don't understand, sitcoms work one way. We've all seen and heard stuff about, they write over the weekend. They do, a reading on Tuesday. They start blocking on Wednesday. They do camera blocking Thursday. They shoot it twice on Friday. Mm-hmm. All right, that's a sitcom. For hour-long projects, hour-long dramas, it's generally anywhere from 7 to 12 days per shoot, which means that if, let's say it's a 10-day shoot, that means there's 10 days of prep. So while one director is shooting for 10 days, the next director is prepping for 10 days.
Got it.
I'm not going to even get a script till day 4 or 5 because they're still writing it during prep.
That's some pretty fast turnaround time then, yeah?
Well, they're writing it for a while, but as far as the storyboarding, for TV, it's generally really, really short. And then I sit with the director and I find out what sequences do you want to storyboard. And it's generally going to be stunts, effects, and fancy camera moves. You never do the whole thing. It's just not enough time. Animated characters, things like that. You always do. So I'll get from the art department, locations, transpo, whoever I need, all the reference materials that I'm going to need to be able to properly draw. Then I sit with the director once they kind of have an idea of what they want. And we break it down shot by shot together. I do it a little differently than some other people. I don't go away and then come back for notes. I literally get approvals at the end of my first meeting, which allows me to spend more time cleaning up and just having fun with the artwork. Plus, I produce animatics in real time because the software that I use that I helped develop called Storyboard Pro. Literally, as I'm drawing, I'm putting in camera moves and layer moves. So they say, all right, let's see what it looks like. I hit play and everything's moving. And so directors love it because they get to really work out, is the humor working? Are the scares working? They could see it in real time. And it's a lot cheaper to make adjustments with me than to shoot something that doesn't work and go back and reshoot it.
So would you say that's the primary goal of a storyboard, is to see what works and what doesn't in a cheaper manner? Is that a fair statement?
Well, I come from a construction background, as I mentioned. Yeah. So the way one of the ways I talk about storyboarding is that it's the blueprint of the construction. So if you read a script and I read a script, we're going to see totally different images in our head. Kind of like if I say, hey, let's build a 4-bedroom house. You might be thinking French Tudor. I might be thinking Spanish or colonial, right? Completely different. Where are the bedrooms? How many bathrooms? Where are the closets going to be placed? Those are all the things that make it specific. So when I read a script, I know what the action is, and then I'll study what the director has done on other episodes or other shows, so I kind of know what their visual style is like. And it's all part of my prep work. Then when I sit down with the director, generally they have an idea or know exactly shot for shot what they want. I'm not going to second guess it. They'll describe it. I'll ask a bunch of questions. I throw out other ideas and we work it out and we build it together. It's their vision that I help plus. And then my storyboards become the visual representation, the blueprint for the other 700 people on the crew. Now, when they look at the script and they read the storyboards, they all know exactly what the director wants. It makes them that much more efficient. We get everything shot right the first time.
Okay. So when you're on when they take the storyboard, do they just have it like on a wall on the set and be like, hey, reference back? Is that usually how that works then? The final product?
It varies. Some do, and it's really cool when they do. I've taken pictures with a bunch of them on different shows. Like on The Walking Dead, they always had it. In fact, because we were off in the woods so often, they would mount them on the all around on a golf cart, and they would drive the golf cart around. And all my storyboards are fluttering as they go from location to location in the woods. So sometimes they do that. I mean, obviously we deliver them digitally. They print some out. Production, sometimes in the production offices, we'll have it there. But it's great for the director to have it up. So they literally take a big red pen and they mark out every shot as they get it. So before we leave a location, they can just look at the storyboards, go, did we get everything we needed for this before we leave this location? So it's incredibly helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned The Walking Dead. What was it like working on The Walking Dead?
Well, I was a huge fan, both of the comics and the show, before I got on. I started on season 9, I think, of The Walking Dead. Yeah. And that's actually what moved me to Atlanta. It was one of my goals was to work on it. And I landed the job before I actually made the move. So that worked out pretty well. But, I love zombie stories. I love horror. I love drawing gore. Nothing was sacred. We just got to have fun. And at this point, between all the different Walking Dead shows I've worked on 10 seasons of killing zombies. So if there's ever an apocalypse, just find me because I know how to survive and kill zombies. I've done every one. And I've even been tasked. I mean, Greg Nicotero, a couple times when I was working with him, would say, all right, I got to run to another meeting, come up with 2 or 3 new ways of killing walkers that we've never done before on the show. I'll be back in 15 minutes. Like, awesome. Yes, absolutely. Yes, sir.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Now, this is kind of in the weeds or off in the wilderness. But have you ever thought about making like an animation just of you like killing zombies, like whatever the things you've enjoyed from the things you've done storyboard wise, and be like, you know what, we're going to make a YouTube cartoon or some other type of thing. It doesn't matter. Like,
well, while I was storyboarding, I've also owned 2 animation studios. So
all right,
I've produced a lot of animation over the years.
Yes,
I've never animated walkers other than the animatics that I do, which I always put money into them. So in that sense, I've done. Now, what I have done, which is fun, The Talking Dead. I'm trying to remember the host name of The Talking Dead. He was the founder of Nerdist.com.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about. I don't remember his name either. But
I'm blanking on his name, which is too bad. But he was a huge Walking Dead fan, obviously. So in one of the sequences, I drew him as a walker. So I found some pictures of him dressed up as a zombie.
Oh,
so
sure.
Just for fun, I just drew him in the storyboards. And then I let his producers know. So they brought me onto The Talking Dead. I was on The Talking Dead 3 times talking about storyboards.
That's awesome.
And the first time was because he was so jazzed and they showed all the storyboards and he did this great intro. Oh, I can't wait to show you guys what the story artist Mark Simon did of me.
It's incredible. Is it Chris Hardwick? Is that the right name?
Yeah, Chris Hardwick. Thank you. Yes,
yeah,
Chris Hardwick. And then, Nicotero directed a third to a half of all the episodes on the original series. I turned him into a walker on one, and we sat down for a meeting. He goes, yes, I saw it. I recognize my nose. Let's move on. But then he grinned at me.
That's awesome.
But I also, I have fun with myself too. Like there's that really in season 10 with the Whispers, Alpha, when her head, when she gets decapitated and her head bites someone in the cheek, I had her bite me. So I'm in the storyboards and it's my cheek getting ripped off by Alpha. Even though only the crew ever saw it, it was really fun to do it that way.
Yeah. It was like Where's Waldo for Mark Simon. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
I have to ask you because it's one of my favorite movies. What was The Water Boy? That had to have been a really fun project to be even a part of. I have to assume.
All right. So The Water Boy was interesting. So I was actually living in Orlando and we shot that in Orlando. And I ended up designing all the team logos on it. I storyboarded. I was the only story artist on it, but we only storyboarded a couple sequences. The visual effects sequences where when people are imagining the football being someone's face or the other players having like a baby head and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Those are the only sequences that I storyboarded. But I also, and this is one of my favorite claims to fame, I designed and drew the tattoo of Roy Orbison that was on Henry Winkler's ass.
No way. That's incredible. That's awesome.
So, and I did everything I just described to you in 3 days. I got everything approved and done in 3 days.
Hey, dude.
So
that's incredible.
I wasn't around a whole lot for it. It was fun to do.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I didn't like the script. I remember talking to my wife and said, well, I don't know what this movie's going to do. I like Sandler.
Yeah.
But, I just didn't find the script very funny. Yeah. When I saw it in the theater, I laughed my ass off. Sandler and the director, Frank Karachi, saw something in the script I flat out did not see. And they created what I thought was absolute comedy gold out of it. So it was really interesting getting a completely different reaction than I expected to get when I actually went to go see it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, as a storyboard artist, do you get the full story and all the context that goes with it for could you ruin seasons of The Walking Dead for people? Like, I can't imagine the NDAs you have to sign.
They're big. And, The Walking Dead says $1 million for every time I would leak something.
Wow, no kidding.
Yeah, and they don't pay me enough to pay that. So
no kidding.
Yeah, they're pretty big. And not all shows do it. I mean, they all have NDAs, but some of the really big ones, because I work on a lot of big shows,
Sure.
I mean, Walking Dead and Stranger Things and Dexter and You and the new Blade Runner that's coming out. A lot of things where they're really particular because fandom really wants to see everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could. And what's interesting, some productions only want to give the story artist sides, which are just a portion of the script that you're going to be storyboarding. Mm-hmm. And I always tell them, I said, this won't work. You have to give me the entire thing. They said, well, no, we can't. I went, no, you have to. My title is story artist. If I don't know the story, I can't help you break it down. And I always give them an example. I've worked on projects where I'm working on scene 30 and 31, but in scene 22, the person was shot in the leg.
Yeah.
If you're just giving me sides, I don't know that they can't walk. So yeah, you got to give me everything. I have to read the entire thing. And then they send it to me. So that comes from people who don't really understand what storyboarding is and the value we bring to productions.
Sure. You mentioned Stranger Things. I have to assume that was some cool art between the upside down and all that stuff. I don't know how much it goes into the storyboarding part of it, but I have to assume that was really fun to draw. I hope
it is. Unfortunately, so I worked on really cool sequence. I did 2 episodes in season 4 because I work with there were 3 different types of story artists on Stranger Things, which is really unusual. There's a production story artist who's just always there. Working with the producers before the director comes in. There was a story artist in the visual effects department. And then there was a story artist who worked with each director. So when one of the directors came in, he did block 2, I think. Yeah, he did block 2. So I was storyboarding with him. And I boarded hundreds of panels on it. But most of them were only rough because as I was starting to do the cleanup, COVID hit and shut us down.
Oh, sure.
So here I am on one of my favorite all-time shows, and that damn little bug shut us down. And I called the producer. I said, I have all the notes for these 2 episodes. Let me just keep cleaning them up. I've already gotten approvals.
Yeah.
Nope, we got to shut down because of insurance. I was like, oh,
that's crazy.
So, and then I was working on, I think, Dexter. When we came out of that. So I couldn't go back on the show. I was on something else already.
Ooh, you mentioned Dexter. Are you storyboarding a lot of murders? That sounds like a lot of fun. It could be a lot of fun.
It is. Now, so here's the cool thing about Dexter. I storyboarded the original pilot of Dexter.
No way. That's cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
I also storyboarded New Blood, Resurrection, and I'm currently on it, along with a couple other shows, on season 2 of Resurrection. So I've been working on Dexter for over 14 years.
Yeah, you're a staple, man. You're in there. That's crazy.
As you know how they call him the Bay Harbor Butcher?
Yeah.
I told there's one of the producers I work with all the time. I said, you ought to call me the Bay Harbor Border because I've been on this so long.
A sweet shirt. Yeah. So with that, are you boarding up like every death, every twist and turn, or how does that?
Not necessarily most of the deaths, but there's car crashes. There's the opening of every season. We're setting up a new type of visual storytelling. Mm-hmm. So I work with the director on the opening episode every season on, all right, here's kind of an idea of what we want to do, how we visually want to tell the stories for the whole season. special camera moves. Anytime you're on a boat, you're always storyboarding everything because shooting on boats sucks. It's really difficult. So everything has to be planned to the nth degree. When do we need to have a platform boat or follow boats, or, when could we do it, something on stage, whatnot. So there's a lot that you have to do. Like on Waterfront, Kevin Williamson, who wrote the first screen and directed the new Screen movie. He created and wrote Waterfront that came out last year on Netflix. And a lot of that was on boats. So I was boarding a huge amount on that one. That was also fun. A lot of good gore and kills on that one too.
That's awesome. So to pull the thread of the water thing, is it just because it's hard to get a shot because of water's unpredictable and it's just you don't know?
Everything is moving.
Yeah,
everything's moving, and you're limited on space because it's a boat. It's not like you can just step off the side unless you've got a barge or something that you're tied up to. But then it takes a long time to readjust. Like when you turn the camera around, you got to move the barge to the other side, retie off everything, and then make sure that the sun is in the right position. Everything takes time when you're on the water. Yeah, it's tough. So, boarding it out really helps the ADs and production managers really plan it properly to make the most of our time there.
Sure, that makes sense. And so, you were a storyboard artist on Creepshow. Is an anthology? Is there something special with an anthology series? Is that unique, or is it just?
Not really. It's just shorter segments. You got 2 or 3 per show. Not every one of them needed it. It was a pretty low budget show. It was really down and dirty, but there was a couple things. Monkey Claw and forget what the other episode was that I worked on, both with Greg Nicotero, because I was still working with him on Walking Dead, and he was the showrunner and did almost half the episodes of Creepshow. So we had one episode in particular where we had a character that was shown as a puppet, as animation, and as a rod puppet on different shots, depending on what we needed the character to do. So, I boarded all the shots of this spindly little character as he was jumping around, and he and I broke the whole thing down that way. That was a lot of fun. Drawing monsters and creatures is always super fun. And the other thing that's fun is when I see the final product, then I often will take certain sequences and I'll edit my storyboards in my animatics to the final cut to see how close it was. And it's surprising how close shot for shot it is. But a lot of it's because it's not my ideas. Yeah. I'm capturing the director's vision. And so
it's just your ability to listen. Good. Yeah, it's like your ability to listen and translate more so than just Yeah. Would you say that's something over what was the learning curve on that, you think? Was it something you've always been good at, or do you think by the time you got to the burbs, you're like, oh man, now I'm a pro? You know what I mean? Whatever.
The learning curve is figuring out how to get your ego out of it. Because every story artist thinks they're a director, and we are. We're directing when we're storyboarding. And a lot of story artists, and I was one of them, if we disagree with the director, we get frustrated. Oh, they should do my shots, my ideas. But we're not the director by title. Mm-hmm. So once I got rid of that and realized I started finding a lot of pride in capturing the director's vision and plussing it.
Sure.
And my career exploded when I realized, this is a better approach. And I started understanding my position and took my ego out of all. I wasn't pushing for my shots to be in. Mm-hmm. And everything instantly got better. I started getting better projects, higher rate, everything. And it was less frustrating. I was having more fun. I mean, literally, it's a plus, plus, plus.
Do you have a favorite moment where you added a little spice to a thing, or some the extra flavor to a storyboard that really popped on the screen? Do you have a?
Well, that happens a lot. I mean,
yeah.
One thing a lot of people don't realize, including a lot of people in the industry, is how much writing storyboard artists do. We write action, we write humor, we write dialogue all the time. One of my favorites, I was working on a Jon Favreau production. It was an animated show with some really good friends of mine, the Kyoto brothers. And the Kyoto brothers do stop motion animation. They're the ones who did all the stop motion animation on Elf.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And they also directed and produced Killer Clowns from Outer Space. So they've got incredible credits, right? Well, they're good friends of mine. And they landed a deal for a book that Stephen Kyoto had co-written, called Alien Xmas. And Favreau signed on to produce it. So I worked with Stephen, the director, hand in hand and boarding the whole thing out. I was the head of story on it. I had a crew of board artists working under me. And he and I see eye to eye on a lot of things. I actually rewrote the third draft of the script. So
that's wild. That's awesome.
And it's really fun. We ended up rewriting again. I shouldn't say we. Two other writers rewrote it because Favreau. This is really funny. So the two protagonists is this little gray alien X, which is why it's called Xmas, and his robot had a kind of a cantankerous relationship between each other. And there was a lot of really funny moments back and forth between them. And Favreau, after we had boarded almost half of the movie, and because in animation you do board everything from beginning to end, you have to, and it's a stop motion animation piece. So I had rewritten it with the director. It's not like I just went out and did it. The director I did it. He comes to us and he goes, what if the lead character X doesn't talk? Well, that changes everything. So the script had to be rewritten. We went back. We had to reboard almost everything we had already done. And it ended up working out great. But we all went into like, oh, my God, this is not the same production. Everything has to change.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. One little note, what it does.
Just
it turned out great. Number one for at least a month. And every Christmas, it hits the top of the charts on Netflix.
Sweet. I'm going to check it out for sure.
Oh, it's really fun. Yeah.
You mentioned You. What was your time like on You?
Believe it or not, the director and one of the producers, same guy I work with on Dexter, Marco Siega. So Marcos brought me on when he started working on You. So I know the last season. I'm trying to remember if I did the last two seasons or just the final season. To be honest, I don't remember. But I love coming up with drama and working on good kills. There's a lot of blood in that. And it was funny when I started on it. I had heard of it, but I had never seen it. And when he gave me a call and said, "Hey, do you want to work on this?" I said, "Yeah, let me check it out." I instantly became a fan. My wife and I just fell in love with the show. And so we just ate it up, trying to catch up so I would understand, what was going on. It was so fun. It was such a specific show. And when I bring it up to people, so many people, they are huge fans of You.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, why was I so late to the party on this? It's a great show. So yeah, it was so fun, really, helping bring it to life. I loved it.
Yeah, awesome. I did want to ask. I watched your TED Talk. That was a lot of fun. Your pants were crazy. I enjoyed that a lot.
I'm kind of known for my crazy pants when I'm talking.
That's awesome. I have to ask, and folks go watch this TED Talk. I'll link it in the video, but. I'm curious the conversation when I'm going to start my TED Talk off with a text from my wife or to my wife. Like, how did that go down?
All right.
Was your wife like, sure, let's do
it. There's a really funny story about that specific part too. And I got to say, because I talk all over the world. I lecture constantly. I have been for years. I host 3-day conferences where I speak all 3 days. And I'm used to speaking. I've spoken 200 or 300 different events.
Sure.
nothing has been as hard as doing a TED Talk because it has to be memorized. So they have to approve word for word what you're doing. And I work with a lot of visuals. They don't want visuals. I mean, I had a few, you saw it, but not as nearly as many as I normally do because the visuals help guide me to, oh, this is the next step. This is the next thing.
Sure.
I'm not very good at memorizing.
Sure.
I know what I'm talking about, but memorizing it's a whole different thing. That was months and months of hard work. And I wanted to start with a joke with it, kind of break the ice. And as you mentioned, I start with a joke about a text to my wife. So when I submit this, the whole thing is about, my whole talk is about always proofread everything and sit on it before you send something out. And I have examples of when that has not worked for me. And I use the example of, my wife sends me a photo of herself. What do you think of your new svelte wife? And I replied, wow. And then after I sent it, I realized I didn't spell wow. I spelled cow. So as we were getting approvals, as I was getting approvals on this, the people who run it, because you've got specific people who train you to get ready for TED Talk. There's a lot to it. Sure. And they said, we can't do that. I went, why not? They said, well, it has to have actually happened. I went, well, it did happen. They said, it really did? I went, yeah. They said, all right, well, I guess you can keep it in. It never happened. I completely made it up.
Oh, thank God. I was like, when I was watching, I was like, there's no way this actually happened.
So what I did, just so I wouldn't have to lie, I texted cow to my wife. Yeah, it happened. Not at all like my story. But I wanted that joke, and I knew it would work, and it did. The whole audience laughed. And it was a great way to start it out. It really punctuated, pay attention to what you write before you send it out. I couldn't believe I actually had to fight for that joke. So,
it seems harmless either way.
So I figured out a way to get it in there. I did. It worked.
Yeah. 100% it did. But I love the premise. I love the idea. Like, I'm really bad about not just proofreading what I write, especially with my phone. So I resonated deeply with your talk in general.
Good. Awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome. I do want to talk about your memoir, though. A little bit about your book, Attacked.
Attacked. Yay!
That was a wild first chapter, my man. I read it on your website. That was, Can you tell folks a little bit more about it? You alluded to it earlier in the interview, but I'd love to hear
So the first chapter was the big attack, where I was attacked by about 30 kids at an outdoor bonfire party. I was raised in Texas, in the north side of Houston. And Texas, there's a bunch of cowboys and hicks just like you think there would be there. And so, we would all go out and get drunk, get high, at this. It was an old unfinished subdivision. And some of the guys, it was the good eggs and the bad eggs are out there. We're all just out there to hook up and have fun, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I was always short. I'm still not very tall, but I was really short in high school. And there was this gang. I call them a gang. It was loosely affiliated. There were 2 ringleaders and a bunch of just thugs that hung out because they got to have fun beating the shit out of people. Mm-hmm. They kind of ran rampant through the school, and no one stood up against them because there were so many of them and a bunch of really big guys. Well, the only time I was ever near them, because I was in all the advanced classes, none of those idiots were in my classes, except for PE. Mm-hmm. And in PE, whenever we'd play basketball or dodgeball, they would just run crazy and slam into people and knock them over and, beat them up beat people up in the gym locker before and after class.
Sure.
Well, I was small, so they would always want to pick on me. But as I mentioned, I grew up in construction. I was small. I just wore big shirts.
Yeah.
I was just one piece of muscle. Because all I did was lift 200 pounds of lumber every time, constantly, for most of my life. So when they would come up and shoulder hit me to try to knock me over in basketball, they'd bounce off me. Mm-hmm. That pissed them off. So they kept trying more and more things to get me back because it would embarrass them when I would get the upper hand when they're a foot taller than me.
Sure.
So we're out at that party the week before, and all this is in the book, but I start with when 30 of them attacked me. Mm-hmm. So the week before the big attack, I'm out there, and this one guy, Perry, walks by. He was one of the ringleaders, and he's bitching and moaning about something. And I just slyly went, no one cares, Perry. And he came over and he got in my face and he starts screaming, and out of nowhere just punches me in the face. And I just stood there. I looked and I said, Perry, dude, you're just not worth my time, which embarrassed the crap out of him. Because look, sure, I've been hit by iron anchors by flinging pieces of 2x4. That little punk ass bitch's fist didn't do shit to me. So a bunch of his friends drug him off, and he could not handle it. So the next week I'm out at that party. I had an old 63 T-Bird that I had rebuilt. And I had a buddy of mine with me. It was a real classic car. We'd pulled around. We're right in front of the bonfire in the car, talking to a couple of girls. A couple other guys came up, just leaning in the windows. And that's when I hear, hey, there's Simon, let's rumble. And Perry and Steve, his other idiot cohort, and about 28 other of their friends jump me. They start punching me and my buddy through the windows. They're grabbing bats and sticks and chains out of their pickup trucks, flaming boards out of the bonfire, and they start whacking on my truck. So I rolled up the window on Perry's arm while he's punching me. I just grabbed his arm, and I had electric windows in the car, even though it was a 63. And I trapped his arm. I put it in gear, and I hauled ass. I drove right through the middle of the party. One of their idiot friends jumped in front of my car to try to make me stop, so I ran over him. And then I missed the exit. So if you read the first chapter, it just gets to where I miss the exit and I spin around. My buddy and I are sweating bullets. We're freaking out. And all we see is a silhouette of these villagers coming after the Frankenstein monster holding torches. I mean, that's literally what I thought, because that's what it looked like. It was late at night, flaming torches. They're coming. And they're all coming to kill us. What you didn't read is my old 63, they blocked off the exit road. So I drove across an open field, and there's gullies before the road, and they had just dug it out. And so there's dirt on both sides. I hit that dirt mound and jumped my car over the gully and landed in the middle of a busy road. And then they followed me home and attacked my entire family in our front yard. So that's what started the whole thing. So I fought them in court. I had of the ringleaders, four main kids, the ones who showed up at the house and were beating on my parents. I had all their parents arrested, and I am the first person in the country to successfully hold parents responsible for the illegal actions of their kids. So if you remember a few years ago, there was the Michigan school shooter, and the parents were arrested because they gave him the gun. That's based on my court case.
No way.
Yeah. So MSNBC interviewed me about my story when all that was coming out, and it was pretty wicked. So all of that led to my having a nervous breakdown and failing that math class, and obviously led to a really pretty kick-ass career. So
it all worked out. But holy cow, man!
Yeah,
your life should be a movie. You should storyboard just your life. You know what I'm saying?
I have started storyboarding the book. There's one sequence that's on the website where I don't know if you saw it. There is an animatic on there as well of the epilogue of the book. It just started storyboarding the opening chapter that you read about the big attack. So I'm working on that, but I'm just so busy in production, I seldom have time to work on it. So sure, it's a good problem to have. You're too busy. Absolutely, yeah. Especially with so many people not working in the industry, I feel very lucky that I'm just solidly busy. I never have a day off. Yeah, being on the outside of it, the more people I interview, the more I'm hearing it's kind of been a rough time the past couple
half year, feels like, give or take.
Yeah. Well,
maybe
ever
more.
since COVID and then the strikes,
Yeah.
never really came back to the same level. So
Yeah, you're totally right. I do want to pull us back to the movie industry a little bit, just because Nickelodeon, you mentioned earlier, and I missed this totally in your bio, but like that's one of my favorite TV channels back when I was a kid. Like I've not kept up with it, obviously, but like I would love to hear like the origin story of Nickelodeon as you were a part of it. You know what I mean? Just anything you could share, or your wife's story if she wants. You know what I mean?
It was really fun. So Nickelodeon had started in New York, and it was a regional network. And when they went national, they decided to partner with Universal Studios in Orlando, and they opened up production offices in a central building and 2 sound stages attached to it on the back lot that would have tours every 45 seconds. Another 250 people would go through, something like that. And the tour was on the second floor there was this glass tube on one side where people could look down on the sound stages as we were working. Well, my wife and I landed working for Nickelodeon before the sound stages were open. So literally when the grand opening of both Universal Studios and Nickelodeon happened, we were there. So, my wife was at the time a production manager. So one soundstage was ready before the other. So she was managing a show on one half of the soundstage, and I was designing the show on the other half. And then the second soundstage opened, and she oversaw everything on one soundstage, and I designed everything on the other soundstage. So we went for a couple of years without having a day off together, because my days off, her shows used our camera crew and vice versa. So, but it was so fun. She worked on the 3rd floor in production, and she became one of the top producers. She produced like Clarissa Explains It All and Gulliver Island, Wienerville,
Awesome.
All these shows. I storyboarded everything at the network, all the live action productions. But I was one of the art directors. There were almost across the board. There were just 2 art directors until right before I left. They brought in 2 alternating other art directors.
Sure.
And it was great. I mean, like I storyboarded the openings for Clarissa, and I did a bunch of second unit directing. Clarissa was a groundbreaking show.
So much fun.
Yeah. But it was really fun. I mean, we had the best parties. Oh my God. Our year-end parties. I mean, we had Kid and Play for us, and Spielberg would come out. In fact, the first time I met Spielberg was at Nickelodeon, because he was a huge fan of Nick. And I literally ran into him. I was walking backwards. I was right outside my office. I had an office on the 1st floor. And I was walking backwards talking to someone about how I could not wait and hopefully I was going to be able to meet Spielberg. And I run into somebody and I turn around, and he's really tall. He's like 8 inches taller than me. And it's Spielberg. I was like, the god of filmmaking right here. I didn't want to wash my back. I just ran into him.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it was fun, but because the sound stages were all new, it was amazing some of the things that were happening. Like they used to always talk in the tours. One of the things that they would do is they would have someone on stage and they'd be mic'd up to the tours that were going through, and the people talking down below had no idea what they were talking about, but they were given a script, and they were saying these sound stages are made so that you could launch a 747 right outside the doors and you wouldn't hear it inside. Yeah, that wasn't true. These were not really well done sound stages. We could hear kids talking on the other side. So when the tours were coming down on the backside, we could hear them while we were shooting.
Sure.
And then we used to, in fact, this is funny. On my wife's show, on Clarissa, the mom on that show, we all got tired of we were like fish in a bowl, because there's thousands of people a day were looking down on us while we were trying to work. And we'd be hearing all this nonsense spewing from the PAs who are talking to, hey, this is happening here, and this is how we do this, none of which was ever true. Well, the mom of the show made a big poster board, and at one point she turned around, holds a poster up, and it says, we'll have sex for work. Um, so
awesome.
she couldn't do it anymore. She no poster board was allowed down there. And then one idiot had the bright idea, hey, let's connect the control room so we can hear what the director is saying down to the soundstage. Now, the control room's up on the second floor where editorial is and the first AD, and they're calling, cut to camera 1, camera 3, camera 2, ready, go, right? So the director isn't on the floor the whole time while we're shooting. They're up in the control room calling cuts because we're doing a live edit while we're shooting.
Sure.
But whoever decided to go live didn't realize directors curse a lot. And this director, I won't mention which one it was because I know.
Spielberg for sure.
No, he wasn't directing anything, but he was a pretty famous director. Was screaming at one of the actors on Clarissa, and he was screaming, "Get that little shit out of there! What the fuck does he think he's doing?" Right? He's just screaming, and this is going out to 250 people on the tour, and
incredible.
We're scrambling to try to turn it off because he's just screaming at a child. Now the kid isn't hearing it.
Yeah,
this is it's the stage manager is hearing it, and everyone else is on headphones, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's no abuse going on, but the kid was screwing up. The director was yelling at all the other adults, about what was happening. So that kind of changed on what was allowed on those tours. It's like, this is production, people. Yeah, there's things that the general public should not be aware of.
Yeah. You can talk to your coworkers different than you're paying guests for sure.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
But one of the fun things about being at Universal, because I before I moved up here to Atlanta, I did a lot of movies like Tooth Fairy 2 and a whole bunch of other things down there. It was at the theme park, so if I had a couple minutes, I would just walk over, go on a roller coaster, and then come back.
Oh, that's dope.
Instead of a
That's
smoking
super
break,
cool.
I'd take a roller coaster break.
Oh, I'm so jealous. That sounds like a great time.
It was awesome. Oh my God, it was so fun. Oh yeah.
Man, I'm very jealous of your life. I do want to end on a couple of questions because
Sure.
I was picking over your website and I wanted to look at some old photos, and I would love to hear context around like this one.
All right, so that's Tony Curtis. For anyone old enough to remember, he was the biggest movie star for years, going all the way back to the 50s, starting with Marilyn Monroe. So Tony Curtis, I was art directing a movie called Midnight with Lynn Redgrave and Tony Curtis. And he only worked for just a few days. It was one of those where, he got a chunk of change to show up, and we just shot out all the scenes all at once. Lynn Redgrave was playing a horror hostess, kind of like Elvira. And he was playing the producer. So he was really great to my crew. And it was really funny. I remember there were a couple things in particular, when I was meeting with him before we started shooting, I was designing his office. He said, I want to have a Soloflex machine. I want my character to seem fit. So I want a Soloflex machine in the background. I said, sure. So I call up Soloflex and I talked to their marketing department. I said, Tony Curtis, who, back in the 80s, he was still huge back then. Tony Curtis has requested a Soloflex for a movie. Would you like the free promotion and send us a Soloflex machine that I can put in there? And they said, absolutely. Where would you like it? So they shipped one out, but it didn't arrive in time. So I got other stuff, and I did everything we needed to for him. But the Soloflex machine shows up a week after we wrap shooting.
Brutal.
So I called Soloflex, and I said, something happened with your trucking. It didn't show up. Yeah, we're aware of that. Sorry about that. There was a confusion in the warehouse. I said, so this incredibly heavy machine is here. Do you want to pick it up? They said, you want it? You just keep it. So I got a Soloflex machine because of Tony Curtis. But which was fantastic. But one of the funny things, I said, all right, Tony, I said, obviously, you're this big successful guy. So I brought I brought a few fake Rolexes and a couple of Rados, which I actually like better than a Rolex. And I held them up. I said, which of these would you like for your character to wear. And he pulls up his sleeve. There's like $150,000 real Rolex on his sleeve. No, I think you got this covered. So I kept the Rolexes for myself.
Pretty Kurt's doing you right.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And it's great. And one of the guys on my crew, it was a pretty big guy. It was about the same size as Tony. And Tony had been wearing this mohair long coat. It's beautiful, $2,500 coat. And again, 80s, $2,500 in the 80s. And as we were wrapping, he looked at the guy and said, "You look about my size. You like this coat?" The guy goes, "Yeah, that's sweet, man." He took it off and gave it to him.
Dude.
So
that's incredible.
Tony was great.
Yeah. Now, speaking of people that I like was huge for a section of time, Larry the Cable Guy had a run that was incredible. Like he was just the guy for a while.
Yeah, he was making like 13 to 15 million a year just doing stand-up. And he had started doing some movies, and when he was hired for Tooth Fairy 2, I was written for him. It was the sequel. The Rock played the Tooth Fairy in the first one. I came on as the story artist, but I also was one of the producers on the movie. I produced all the animation. There's a big animated sequence in it that I designed and animated. Or my studio animated it.
Sure.
And Willie Castro was the actual animator on that sequence, which just turned out phenomenal. But Larry was a goofball, and he has 3 kids on set, half the time, and they were just wild kids. But one of the things I remember about Larry, besides the fact looking at him in a pink tutu, not a pretty sight. Funny as shit, though.
I believe it. Yeah.
But because he did all this touring, he had this amazing RV, and so we were just wrapping the movie, and the director and I were there talking with him, and he said, "Hey, you want to check out my RV?" We're like, "Oh hell yeah, we want to check this thing out." So we go in, and it is gorgeous. I mean, it is decked out, marble and gold and brass, everything. I mean, it's amazing. And there's TVs, big flat screen TVs everywhere, right? And as we're on his bus, we all look up. Breaking news. And the tidal wave in Japan was happening live. I watched part of Tokyo or whatever area of Japan was being washed away with Larry in his RV. It's
what a memory.
Memory I'll never forget.
Yeah, what a memory. That's incredible. Yeah. But is this a Sequest alien? Did I read that right?
It is. Who is in that suit? Here's a question for you. Because the actor is probably one of your favorite of all time.
Oh, don't do this to me. Don't make me feel bad on my own podcast. Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That, and I am not kidding, is Mark Hamill.
No way.
So,
no way.
Mark is obviously, he's really big in voiceover. Obviously, he did the Joker in Batman.
The Joker,
among 100 other roles, but that's always one of my favorites. Well, he's a big fan of art. So whenever he would come in to play this character, it was a morphing character. He played a scientist who was actually this alien. He would morph into the alien. And I helped design that alien. I did the original illustration for the alien. Well, Mark used to come into my office and watch me draw. That's awesome. Come on. I named my first child Luke.
Oh, man. Dude, you were probably dying. Was that the most shaky hand you've ever been in terms of like just drawing stuff?
No, but my heart was beating 1,000 beats a minute. Are you kidding? The reason I was thinking about even start working in Hollywood, because I was 13 when Star Wars came out, and I was in the front row, and that ship comes over my head, and I was like, I have to figure out how to do this. And now Luke Skywalker is in my office. So the original design I did of that alien, he signed the original art to me, and he said, "To Mark, next time make me something cuter, Mark Hamill." Yeah.
Do you just have that just stapled in your house somewhere? Is it framed up? Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that was what a freaking treat that was.
Yeah. Had I known that was Mark Hamill, that would have been the last thing I asked you. But now you
can show it to other people and you can have one up on them.
That's true. That's true. But I would love to hear about this one, though. This is my last picture, but what's going on here?
All right. So that is Jonathan. God, why am I blanking on his last name? Winters. Jonathan Winters. Mm-hmm. And for those listeners who don't know who Jonathan Winters is, he was the inspiration for Robin Williams. He was Robin Williams' hero. And Jonathan Winters was nuts, but the funniest person ever. And he was known for being quicker than anyone, which is why Robin started emulating that with all of his stuff. And they appeared together a number of times. As Jonathan Winters was waning, Robin was starting, so they overlapped for a bit. Mm-hmm. Well, he was known for a couple different characters. One was this old grandmother character that he would be on Laugh-In and Smothers Brothers and other shows, which was absolutely hysterical. Well, I was designing a series of stovetop stuffing commercials back in the 80s.
Sure. As you do.
And one of them was Vanna White, the letter-turning gal, right? Mm-hmm. And the other set of commercials were with Jonathan Winters. So, I had the set built and designed, and I'm there just kind of overseeing everything, the art department. And Jonathan comes in, dresses the grandma, and he is making quips about everything. In commercials, especially Emily Lacey was the director on those spots. He was one of the biggest commercial directors at the time. And he was known for doing 40 and 50 takes of every shot.
Sure.
So these were long, long, long days. I have never laughed harder, longer, and straighter in my life than being on the set with Jonathan Winters. I mean, as soon as Lee would say, cut, something would catch Jonathan's eye, or he would make fun of the director the way he said cut, or what the gaffer was wearing, or whatever, and would just launch into this thing. The problem was, this is literally the funniest person in the world, right?
Sure. Yeah.
None of us are going to work when we have a front row seat to the best comedy act ever. So we're laughing hysterically. They finally, in between shots, they had to take him off the set so we'd get work done. Because first of all, we were doubling over. We were laughing so hard. But second of all, no one wanted to miss a single line. So literally between every shot, he'd be shuffled off and then brought back in, shuffled off and brought back in. It was absolutely fantastic. It was one of the greatest days in production.
I very much believe that. That's incredible.
It was awesome.
What? And I think this is my last question, only because you mentioned you were a renowned skateboarder. Did you run into like the Deer Decks and the Tony Hawks of the world then? Were you?
No, Tony's younger than me. And he was based out of California. So I was skateboarding in Houston, and I got to be kind of known there. I mean, it was really wild. Here I am, a 12-year-old kid, right? And I go to a skateboard park like an hour away, and kids would come up and hold up one of my boards with my stickers underneath. Say, hey, I've got your board. And I'm 12. Yeah. It was heady, man. It was really heady. So, but fun.
Well, I believe that very much. That's awesome. Yeah. Oh man, there was a guy that had his own TV show it feels like a very similar story. Like he started very young in terms of being a very famous. Yeah.
Rob Diedrich.
Yeah. It just sounds like, I mean, it's probably overwhelming, I would assume, at that age. It's just like,
it's awesome. I didn't have his fame. I mean, Rob Diedrich is an amazing personality.
It's different. It's different. But like at the same time, it's the same.
But it was fun.
I believe it. Do you still skateboard?
I do. Not a whole lot, but I do. In one of my boys, his I don't want to call her girlfriend because they're
whatever.
I don't know what to call her. She is his one and only. But she wanted to learn to skateboard. Didn't know I was a skateboarder. So
sure.
So I took her outside and I taught her how to skateboard and do a couple stunts in one day, and it was super fun. And now I also have electric boards because I live in a hilly area and I don't like going uphill. So
sure.
I have an electric skateboard with square wheels.
Excuse me?
Yeah, the square wheels. They're called shark wheels. They are the fastest, smoothest riding wheels you will ever ride. If you look at the profile, they look square, but they're created with the sine wave, so they actually roll perfectly smooth.
Got it.
They're the most unreal things you've ever seen, and they're unbelievable. Better grip and faster. It's amazing. So
that's dope.
Yeah,
when you first said square wheels, like, how does that roll? How do we roll with this?
It's shocking. You wouldn't, looking at it, you'd never think it would work, and it does.
Well, Mark, I could talk to you for forever. You've lived a very interesting life. What else would you like to promote? Anything that I missed you want to call out to the fine folks at home?
I do have a book that came out a couple of years ago called Start at the Top that a lot of people would really like. And this kind of goes into more detail of a lot of the stories of my life, all dealing with business. So I call this inspirational stories to get you off your ass. To start at the top, I don't believe in working your way up because I never really have. Like my first movie when I was hired, just for instance, when I got hired at Roger Corman's studio, I was hired as the construction coordinator. And 2 weeks later, I was the art director. The first commercial I worked on, which just as a favor, I didn't want to do it. I was hired as a PA. And I was already art directing, but a friend of mine needed someone and she trusted me. She asked me to come just be an extra hand on set. By lunch, I was running the art department. When I got my job for Spielberg, when I found out he was bringing a production in town, 15 minutes later, I was a storyboard artist. So
that's incredible.
So I have all of these stories, both in production and outside of production, how I landed other things and, how I would get meetings at DreamWorks and how I sold my first training program to Keller Williams, which then became the biggest real estate company in the world, right? And I sold it to the founder, Gary Keller, the very first one I had ever done. So that's incredible. So Start at the Top is all these stories and how I did it, and then I wrap each one up with what I learned from it. But probably my favorite chapter, and I know it's my kid's favorite chapter in it, it's called Fuck Ups, because not everything I try works. And I'm very open about it. And I had some face-planting screw-ups. And I tell them all. So, but anyway, it's a really fun book. And I actually wrote it for my kids to help them in their careers. When they were in college, I wrote it. And as a way to help them look past, you're told you have to do this many hours or this many years in a role, or you have to do this. There's always a way to go past that. So Start at the Top means two things. It means not working your way up, just jumping to the top. But it also means when you want something, don't talk to all the people who can tell you no. Go right to the only person who can tell you yes. So start at the top. And I've done that over and over. Because I could give a shit what people below the owner says. If the owner has the final say, that's the only one I want to talk to. Sure. So I bypass everybody else and I go right to the one I need. And it works.
Yeah. Well, folks, go get his book. Where can they find you online, Mark? Anywhere?
Online, for my books, it's marksimonbooks.com. So it makes it easy. Or for storyboarding, it's storyboards-east.com. Otherwise, find me on LinkedIn. That's pretty much my main area. Because I do a lot of business on LinkedIn. So you can find me there. I'm easy to find.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening. It's been a wonderful time talking with Mark. Have a good day. See you, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you.